Hey, how's it going, everyone? Kid Komodo here, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different per community suggestion. And I'm going to be covering and kind of giving some of my thoughts on the latest patch notes. Um, and I've kind of read through them a little bit on my own, and I just kind of want to go through some of my thoughts. I can't say I and usually I don't, to be fair, but I can't say I agree with all of the changes that they made. I think some of them were definitely warranted. I think some of them were unwarranted for sure. And so let me get those pulled up here. Okay. So in their little prologue, prologue. I'm not sure which one. They're saying that they want to lower the power of AP Mythics, and kind of buff up some of the things that have been weaker, which I think is fine. Now, starting with Amumu, they basically triple nerfed his W. They lowered the base damage, they lowered the ratio, and they also fixed a bug that caused it to tick more often than it should. So a triple nerf to the W, plus the nerfs that they've already implemented on the previous patch for any items that build out of Balmy's Cinder. So Sunfire, Frostfire, Gauntlet, all of that. The damage on those has already been nerfed as well. So definitely warranted. Amumu could get so tanky and still do so much damage between Sunfire and his W. I still think he's going to be strong because they didn't really remove any of the tank stats, and he still brings a lot of CC to the table. So still going to have the CC, still going to have all that tankiness. He just won't be doing quite as much damage, which just means that he becomes less of like a 1v9 champion and more of a team-dependent champion. So definitely a warranted change. He's still going to be strong. I don't think this means that like, oh, you can never pick Amumu. Amumu's dead. Like, no, he's still going to be strong. You just won't be topping the damage chart like you were in the previous patch, which is good. Similar change to Hecarim. They nerfed his AD conversion on his passive. So for those of you that don't know, Hecarim's passive converts bonus movement speed to AD, which is why things like Predator or Phase Rush or Ghost, all of those things are very strong on him because of the conversion. So I think lowering that conversion percentage is good. Also, lowering how much movement speed he gets from his E. And so both of those, lowering the movement speed he gets from his E will also lower how much is getting converted. So definitely a decent nerf to both his movement speed and the damage that he does. Hecarim was very strong. I've seen quite a few Hecarims start to build Divine Sunderer, I believe is what it's called. And very similar to Amumu, they're just very tanky, but also do lots of damage. And so definitely a warranted nerf. Again, I still think the champion's going to be strong. I don't think that all of a sudden Hecarim's going to be unplayable because of these changes. It's just he's going to be more balanced, I guess you could say. For Calista, looks like they just fixed 2 bugs, but it should buff her. For those of you who thought she felt kind of weak in the past patch, she should kind of feel back to normal. I don't think she's going to be strong. I don't think that these bug fixes suddenly make her viable because there are just so many other strong AD carries right now. But we'll see. Maybe it was having a bigger impact than we realize. But who knows? Kale, we'll talk about Kale again later, but she's basically getting double nerfed because they are nerfing Nethers Tooth. And so she is losing bonus attack speed from her passive, and she's also losing on-hit damage, which we'll get to later from the Nethers Tooth nerf. Again, I don't think either of those changes is going to be enough to kill the champion. It's just now she's really going to be a farm to 16 champion, which I guess is hard to do right now, or at least it was in the previous patch. Maybe with these new changes, it'll be a little bit easier to scale. But in patch 10.23, any scaling champions, Kassadin, Kale, were in a rough spot compared to Season 10 because the games were just over so much quicker. There was a lot more damage in the game. And so I think even though she is getting nerfed here, I think some of the other changes that they're making will still allow Kale to hit that hyper scaling late game champion that we're used to. So I think if that is the style that you played Kale in already, you'll be fine. You just play safe during laning phase, go for your level 11, your level 16, and try to win late game. With these changes, whereas before her mid game was actually pretty strong. Between how strong Nethers Tooth was and how strong she synergized with it and her abilities, her mid game was not as weak as it used to be. So back to being a level 16 champion. Next we have Samira. They lowered the damage ratio on her passive for her melee attack, the big sword that she swings in melee range. And they also decreased the dash range. It's decreased by 150 at level 1, 125 at level 4, but really in the levels that she was strong, level 8 and 12, it's only decreased by 50 and 25 respectively. And so really Samira is still going to be a strong champion. Her mid game is still going to be about as strong as it was prior to these changes, especially because Kraken Slayer is getting a buff. Now I know for the most part Samira goes shield bow, but with the Kraken Slayer buffs, it may become a new item for her. Now, what really makes Samira oppressive is her ability to increase the duration of CC with the knockup that she does, as well as the amount of healing and damage she does with her ultimate. And neither of those were changed with these. And so I think between some of the ADC items getting buffed and the fact that these changes really don't hit her that hard, I still think Samira is going to be very strong. I don't think this is really enough to kind of bring her down to the same level as a lot of the other AD carries. But we'll see. I just personally think she's still going to be strong. Next, we have Tryndamere. I am always pretty nervous about Tryndamere buffs. I think the champion, because of his kit, because of the, just because of the way the champion is designed, he's a lot like Rise, where he either feels useless or broken. And maybe they were seeing something in the statistics where Tryndamere just wasn't doing as well as in Season 10. But the thing you have to keep in mind is they're buffing the AD from his Q, and they're basically double buffing the AD that he gets from his Q, and they're buffing some of the items that Tryndamere builds. Especially if you want to start going Phantom Dancer, which they buffed this patch. So I'm nervous. I think Tryndamere is going to be pretty strong because it's basically a triple buff. They buffed the AD, they buffed the AD per missing health, and they're buffing some of the items that he likes to build. So I think Tryndamere is going to feel pretty strong. In addition to the fact that if you're not in organized play, if you're playing solo queue, it's hard to communicate properly on how to deal with a Tryndamere before you're entire top lane is down to its inhibitor, and so I think that I'll have to keep an eye on it, but I think Tryndamere is definitely going to be a strong champion for this patch. So we'll see. Some Varus changes, really mostly nerfs. When I first looked through the changes, I thought maybe it would kind of open him up to be brought back into the mid lane. And for those of you who are new to me and my channel and my stream and all of that, I do like to play Varus mid lane. I think it's a good option for, like, if you're not really a Zed player, if you're not really a Yasuo player, having a ranged AD champion that you can play mid lane if you've got a lot of AP on your team is nice. I thought maybe this would kind of bring him back after they nerfed a lot of his ratios in Season 10. I don't think it's going to, though, kind of reading through the specifics of it. His Q is going to do more damage if you already have Blight stacks on an opponent. But the problem with Varus is because of his lack of mobility and with as much damage as is in the game right now, and as much mobility as they added between like Gale Force and Prowler's Claw and Stridebreaker, I think is what it's called, it is so dangerous to be Varus, right? So yeah, if you can get 3 auto attacks off, fully stack your Blight, and then fully charge your Q and hit someone with it, it's gonna do more damage because of these changes. But I don't think that's realistic for Varus. He also no longer gets cooldown reduction for detonating Blight. They kind of moved that here. Detonating a Blight stack on enemy champions now reduces all basic cooldowns by 12%. So basically you could get a 36% cooldown off of your Q as opposed to a 9-second reduction. I'm not really sure what the math is there. I think 9 seconds was actually a bigger cooldown reduction than 36% is, because it's a 20-second cooldown. So 36% of 20 seconds is like, I don't know, 7 or 8 seconds. So you're not even really getting as much cooldown as you were before. The damage is higher. That's nice. The missile speed of his R is lower and his W does less damage. I honestly think this actually makes him weaker, because despite getting, up to 50% increased damage on his Q, I don't think he's ever going to get to that point. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to get 3 autos and then detonate a fully charged Q on that same target. It just doesn't seem realistic. So I don't think Varus is back. I don't think Varus is back. I think they would need to kind of bump up some of his ratios back to where they were for him to be viable. These 2 changes I'll kind of cover at the same time because they're the exact same change. For those of you who aren't familiar, who maybe haven't been playing, Yasuo and Yone have been very strong because of the new Rage Blade. So what Rage Blade does is it converts your crit chance to bonus on hit damage. And so basically, because Yasuo and Yone, their passive doubles their crit chance, they were getting double on hit damage from Rage Blade, and that will no longer be the case. And they're actually going to change Rage Blade in patch 10.25 to actually completely remove crit chance. And so that'll be a pretty big change starting in patch 10.25. But what that means for patch 10.24 is that Rage Blade is no longer the go-to item for these 2 champions. You'll actually want to just go the normal crit build that you were going before. And then in patch 10.25, it won't even be viable anymore. You could probably still get away with building Rage Blade on these 2 champions in 10.24. In 10.25, it'll be dead. I've only built Blade of the Ruined King once, but it did feel pretty strong. And just kind of reading through what you get from Blade of the Ruined King, it definitely felt like a strong item. So increasing the gold by 100, reducing the attack speed by 5%, I definitely think that's warranted. I don't think it's going to kill the item. I think it just kind of brings it more in line with everything else. which was the point of the change. This is where I'm going to start kind of getting a little I'm going to be in disagreement with what Riot has done. For those of you who watched my mage analysis from a few days ago, you'll know that I think that there is not enough ability haste on the items in this game for mages specifically. Now, getting 5 ability power on Cosmic Drive is nice, but it's not. I don't think it's going to do what they're wanting it to do, which is bumping it to a second item choice. There are rarely times when I'm sitting in a game and I'm like, you know what would be an awesome second item after my Leandris, or an awesome second item after my Ludens? Cosmic Drive. Cosmic Drive would be really good here. I think it needs more if they want it to be a second item choice. Now, as like a third or fourth item choice, I think Cosmic Drive can be really good on some champions, but as a second item choice, they would need to buff it a little bit more than this. Demonic Embrace and Leandris, which we'll get to later, are both being nerfed. The burn on both of those is being nerfed. I can't say it's unwarranted. Champions like Brand and Malzahar have both been very strong since the new season started, and so I think it's warranted. It's not a huge nerf anyway. It's only 0.3% max health. And so I think on champions like Brand and Malzahar, Demonic Embrace would still be your second. Definitely no later than your third item if you're wanting to go Rylai's as your second item. But yeah, I think what all this does is kind of bring it into line with other items, I guess. As a champion who does a lot of dot damage like Malzahar, Brand, you're still going to want to build Demonic, in my opinion. Especially with tanks being as strong as they are, having that max health damage is very nice. Eclipse getting nerfed again because they nerfed the proc damage in patch 10.23, I believe, and now they're nerfing how often you can proc it. I think this is good though. Eclipse was very strong. AD carries were building Eclipse. Quinn was building Eclipse. I've seen Eclipse on Renekton. I think Eclipse was very strong because not only do you get the damage proc, but you also get the shield. And so I think that this is definitely a warranted change. I don't think it's going to kill the item. 4 seconds for ranged actually can feel like a long time. 4 seconds in everyday life doesn't feel like very long, but 4 seconds in 4 seconds in League feels like an eternity. And so I think this could be a big change for ranged champions that were taking Eclipse. So maybe Riot is just wanting to kind of focus Eclipse as a melee specific item. So we'll see. I think this is a really nice change for junglers. The fact that the Omni Vamp will now include AoE damage, I think that will help clears for champions like Shyvana or Karthus. I guess any champ that does AoE will benefit from this. So less Vamp overall, but it will include AoE damage, whereas before it did not. Or didn't include it all the way up to the 12%. So I think this will be a nice change to kind of keep junglers healthier overall. Let's see. Essence Reaver. I think Essence Reaver was already a pretty strong item on certain champions, like Ezreal, I guess. And I think that Ezreal has kind of struggled, so I think for Ezreal specifically, this will feel really nice. I don't think, again, this is going to drastically change. I don't think all of a sudden you're going to see Essence Reaver on like every champion because they gave it 10 more AD. I just think on the champions that already benefited from Essence Reaver, it may just become a higher priority item, but nothing game changing, I don't think. Kraken Slayer. Kraken Slayer was not being built very often just because you get the safety of Shield Bow or the mobility and by extension safety of Gale Force. And with as much damage as was in the game and how strong assassins were, There were very few games that you could build Kraken Slayer because you needed the safety of the other two ADC items. Now, I think this is almost like a double buff to Kraken Slayer because they're removing a lot of that assassin damage, and we'll get to some of those changes here in a little bit. They're removing a lot of that assassin damage while also buffing Kraken Slayer, so it's almost like a double buff. So I think Kraken Slayer will definitely be strong, and I definitely think we're going to see it a lot more in this patch. So kind of a little bit nervous about that, but we'll just have to kind of see how it goes. Leandris, we already talked about this one. They're lowering the ratio scaling. Now, 1% is not going to be a huge deal. So the example I like to use is 200 AP. So 200 AP at a 2.5% AP scaling was 5. So per second, it contributed 5 damage. Now, lowering that to 1.5 makes it 3. So you're losing 2 damage per second at 200 AP. At 600 AP, you're losing 6 damage per second. It's not really going to change that much about it. Leandris is still going to be strong, and Leandris is definitely the strongest mage item because we're about to get to Luden's nerfs. I'm astounded that they nerfed Luden's, but we'll get there in a second. Leandris is by far the strongest mage item after the changes that they made this patch. 1% AP, it's whatever. Like, even at 1,000 AP, you're losing 10 damage per second. So it's like, that's not going to be enough to kill this item. It's still going to feel very strong. It still has very good stats. It gives ability. It's one of the few items that gives a lot of ability haste. Leandris is still very strong. Keep building it. Keep building it. Don't build Luden's. We'll get there. Lichbane, this is some of that assassin damage I was talking about. They're lowering the AP ratio. This, in addition to the Night Harvester nerfs that they also introduced that we'll get to. Fizz was a big builder of Night Harvester into Lichbane. Echo, Night Harvester into Lichbane. And so for both of those items to get nerfed, I think is huge. I think it's definitely warranted. And so I'm excited to kind of see mid lane open back up a little bit. I'm excited to see some of that AP assassin burst damage go down. Again, I don't think this is going to kill the item, but because Lichbane was nerfed and Night Harvester was nerfed, I think you'll definitely see a much lower priority on champions like Fizz. Luden's Tempest, like I said, I'm astounded that this item was nerfed. I think it was already weak. Now, maybe the movement speed was pretty high. 30% movement speed is quite a bit. So changing the movement speed, I could definitely see. But to lower the proc, to lower the damage proc, I am astounded. Luden's already felt so bad, especially against tanks. Trying to kill a tank building Luden's Tempest is actually impossible. And so for them to lower that damage ratio even more, I think it's completely unwarranted. If anything, if they wanted to lower the movement speed to 15%, I honestly think they should have buffed the damage ratio to 20%. For it to be a viable item, or for it to be an item that feels good to build. Because right now, Luden's feels awful to build. I can't believe they double nerfed it. Moonstone was mostly just a bug fix, it looks like. I don't have a lot of experience with Moonstone, to be honest with you. It does look like they increased the base healing, but lowered the percentage healing for each second spent in combat. Probably works out to similar levels of healing. I'm not really sure. I can't say. So these two we've kind of already touched on. Nethers Tooth, they are lowering the on-hit AP ratio. I think that, again, it's not going to kill the item. It's not going to kill any champion that was using the item. It still gives you 50% attack speed, and it still gives you 100 ability power behind only Death Cap. Death Cap is the only item that gives more ability power than Nethers Tooth. So still a very strong item. I don't think 5% AP scaling is by any means going to kill the item. It's still going to be strong. I still think it could even be strong enough to build before your mythic. So for champions like AP Twitch or Kale, they were building Nethers Tooth before their mythic, and I still think it's strong enough to warrant that, especially because they have nerfed a lot of the AP mythics, much harder than they nerfed Nethers Tooth. So I think Nethers Tooth definitely still a viable first item. Night Harvester and Hextech Rocket Belt, they are lowering the base damage by 50, it looks like, on both of those. And also lowering the movement speed from the Rocket Belt. These items both felt very strong. I think that, again, the items are not dead. The items are still going to be strong. It's just they're not going to feel like you have to build these items or like you get such a huge boost when you build these items. I think they're just going to kind of be more in line with the other mythics. They'll definitely still feel good on champions that benefit from them. So for champions like Galio building Hextech Rocket Belt, or champions like Echo building Hextech Rocket Belt, like it's still going to feel like a good item. It's just not going to feel busted, which again was the point of a lot of these changes. Phantom Dancer, lowering the cost, increasing the duration that you're ghosted, which means you don't have any minion collision, I believe. I think this is also part of the reason why I'm kind of nervous about the Tryndamere buffs, because Phantom Dancer is a good item on Tryndamere, especially with the changes they made to give it so much attack speed, plus the fact that Tryndamere gets crit from his Rage Bar, crit from Phantom Dancer. I think the Tryndamere changes plus the Phantom Dancer changes are gonna make him feel very strong, which I'm nervous about. Prowler's Claw, increasing the damage by 5, that's whatever. Prowler's Claw was already a pretty strong item. It's going to be a buff for Pyke, for those of you who like to play Pyke mid lane. I mean, you'll take it, right? Pyke didn't get nerfed, and they buffed his primary mythic item, so Pyke basically just gets a free 5 attack damage. Again, they nerfed another AP mythic. I don't think Riftmaker really needed to be changed, personally. I think it's definitely going to feel like one of the weaker mythics for AP users after these changes. But especially like champions like Rumble, or if you were building it on a Kali, I think you are going to feel this change, because I already didn't think Riftmaker was broken. I thought it was in a pretty good spot. And so I think these changes will definitely make it feel like one of the weaker mythics. 20 damage. I think this is specifically to shields. I think it's fine. I think the shield damage on Serpentis Fang was pretty low anyway. And so buffing it by 20, I think, is definitely warranted. I don't think it's going to make this item a must build for assassins. It's just going to be like, if you're against a lot of shields, or the enemy team has Mountain Soul, like, yeah, maybe you build Serpentis Fang because of the buff. I don't think it's a big game changer. These are game changers. Holy moly, Tyr felt so bad to build and to stack. It felt awful. Anytime you're like, oh, this is a Seraph's game, or like, oh, this is a Muramana game, like, it just felt so bad. So for them to lower how many stacks you need to fully stack it and to give it a base mana buff, holy moly. There are going to be so many champions that can actually start Tyr. Cassiopeia, Kassadin, these champions can actually start Tyr. They can get to their Seraphs. It gives more mana overall. It's only 10, but the fact that you can stack it faster and it gives 10 more mana than it used to, oh, it's going to feel so good. Definitely a warranted change. They even may have gone slightly overboard. I haven't tested it yet. I'll have to test it later. But I think Tyr is going to feel so much better to build and to stack with, and Seraphs is going to feel stronger. So definitely some warranted changes that I think are going to be really nice for the champions that use those items. This they actually introduced in patch 10.23, but did not include it in the patch notes. So for those of you who were paying attention, cannon minions in mid lane were giving less gold. It was definitely noticeable. Now the attack speed, I actually did not notice. I did not realize that the cannon minions were getting that big of an attack speed increase against towers. That is nice for champions that like to roam a lot. So Zed, Talon, Ari, whoever, they are going to be missing out on potentially a lot of tower damage when they roam. And so I think that's nice for champions that don't really roam as much or can't afford to roam, or it's too dangerous for them to roam. I think this is a nice change to allow them to focus on pushing the tower, getting damage on the tower. So definitely a good change. I'm not too sure about the 10 less gold. It's honestly, I mean, it's not a huge income decrease, but it is still 10 less gold. That could be, that could be a control ward on your back. Depending on how long you've been in lane, that could mean the difference between affording a control ward and not. So you could see effects in that regard. That's really the last changes. You'll lose less LP if you have someone AFK in your game, which is a change they should have made 8 years ago. You should not be punished for someone that you do not know AFKing in your game. I get it if you're duo queued, trio queued, quad queued. I get that if your teammate AFKs that you should still get punished fully. I get that. If you're in solo queue, ooh, I'm getting heated. I need water. If you're in solo queue and a random solo queue teammate AFKs, you should not take the full LP loss, okay? This is a change they should have made 8 years ago. And so I'm very happy about this, in addition to the changes they made to the promotion series and just the general ladder changes that they made. I think this is going to feel like a much better year of League than Season 10 did, so I'm excited about that. They updated 60 item icons, thank you, and fixed a bunch of bugs. Thank you. All right. Definitely a lot of visual clarity issues in the previous patch, so hopefully this is cleared up to some extent. Other than that, it's just quality of life, new skins, all of that. So that'll be patch 10.24. Other than the Ludens change, I think all of the changes are warranted. I'm nervous about Trendemir. I think he's going to be strong, and I can't believe they nerfed Ludens because it was already weak. Other than that, all the other changes I could kind of see, and I definitely think almost all of them were warranted in one shape or another. So we'll see. All in all, a pretty good patch. If you release a patch this big and only 2 of the changes are kind of suspect, I think it's a pretty decent patch overall. But we'll have to see. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. If you're new to the channel or just haven't had a chance to do it yet, don't forget to subscribe. All of these things will kind of help us grow the channel, reach new people, and just continue to kind of build the community. So thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.